Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Conversations. It's always a pleasure to sit down and riff with my good pal Tiarnie. We love to go deep into the cosmos and just have a chat, as two astrologers just talking about our special interests and our biggest passions in life. And we love to just record these conversations and share them with you because even when we sometimes tend to go on our astro tangents, I think that there's always little nuggets of wisdom in there somewhere for you guys. And today we want to talk about relationships and bringing it in through a lens of astrology, of course, and helping you guys kind of discern and decipher relationship themes and cycles and kind of what is happening now for a lot of, in particular, long-term relationships. Tiarnie has some really amazing stuff to share on that. Tiarnie, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Nice to see you again, love.
Nice to see you. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been thinking.
We've warmed up with a 1 hour and 20-minute chat before we pressed record.
I know, right? And as soon as we kind of just like naturally wrapped that up, we're like, why didn't we just press record?
Yeah, it was quite personal things too, but still, like, because we were talking, I mean, we've just, even though we're going to stick to this, but I just have to say, we're talking first fleet, cult leaders, signs, it's just been like,
it's been a journey.
It has. And just the fact, talking about the Pluto return in America, darling, and then the fact that, this 1788 Australia chart has Pluto in Aquarius. So interesting too that in the next 10 years, realistically, there's some level of, Australia having this big Pluto change and I just want you to talk about, what you were talking about. I know we're talking about relationships, but we've just got it, like, this was really juicy information.
Yeah. It was. So I'm just trying to get it back in my mind.
Yeah. And so you talked about what had happened that many years ago, 250 years ago, those cycles, babe.
Yeah, exactly. So, with Australia and in correlation with the Pluto return of the US, is fascinating because, especially for those of you that are maybe not Australian, don't really know much about Australia. So, we officially became a nation in the early 20th century, the 26th of January, 1901. And so in terms of like, white people signing pieces of paper, that's an important date for Australia. But, going back, the colonization of Australia began in the late 18th century. And it was really in the very early period of Pluto beginning its transit through Aquarius. So, Australia has a lot of reckoning to do with its very active part in colonization. And I think, as Australian people, I hope that we are aware of this. But I think it's very easy to kind of like look at, because if you Google like, the chart of Australia, it's going to bring up 1901 and that's all well and good. Yes, we became a unified peoples, I guess. And that has Pluto in Gemini. And there's lots of stuff in that chart that is very important and pertinent to Australia and the cycles that it's going through. But I think it's almost in a way kind of easy to just say, oh, that's Australia's Pluto return, because guess what? We don't have to deal with that in our lifetime. But actually, we should be dealing with it in our lifetime. And we have a very powerful opportunity in especially the beginning part, or really the mid part of this decade, the beginning part of Pluto in Aquarius, to, reckon with ourselves and face a lot of things. And I think even just as, because Australia loves to ride the coattails of America politically, can't say I'm the biggest fan of that, but anyway, I think there is going to be a lot of stuff that is going to be a kind of natural follow-on for us from what is happening with the Pluto return in the US. And, because, yes, it's a big deal. Okay, America's going through its Pluto return. But for fuck's sake, plenty of countries are going through their return at different times. And it doesn't, define or shape the rest of the world. And I'm not saying that the Pluto return of America is not important. It is, but there's a lot of shit going on for a lot of other countries. And, you know, we need to look at that period of time in history globally, because the shift from Pluto in Capricorn into Aquarius was when colonization really reared its ugly head, right? Yes, for hundreds of years there had been slavery prior to that, to an extent that we had never seen globally before. But the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius, you know, it started to be, you know, let's look at when Europe decided to divide up Africa as Europe 2.0. You know, that was all happening here in the 1800s. And so I think, you know, America, Europe, and Australia really has a lot of stuff being stirred up now. Yes, of course, through the United States Pluto return, but also their own part in the early days of Pluto in Aquarius. And I just think it's really important to bring that up, because it's very easy to think, you know, everything is centered around America. Or it's very easy to say, oh, you know, Australia's Pluto return, you know, not my lifetime, not my problem. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't really work that way. And especially not with Pluto in Aquarius, because, you know, Aquarius is the sign of the people. So us, we are alive and kicking at this time. We are going to have things to move through and face through this.
Well,
so
Pluto's going to hit the sun in that 1788 chart first, though. 5-degree sun in Aquarius. So Pluto will be hitting that for a couple of years before he gets to his own Pluto return. And I think it is important, like what you said, that we shouldn't just cast it off as, oh, Pluto in Gemini, because that is decades and decades and decades away. So the thing is that I think that by really looking at this 1788 chart, it's really important for us to have that transformation and that, you know, dredged up so that we can heal. For me, it's a very healing time. So I think that it's very important.
Yeah, but, you know, you're right with Pluto on the sun first, because, I mean, Pluto's sun is, I mean, by definition, astrological definition, is power and control and ego, right? Yeah. So, you know, Australia is going to have to move through a lot of those themes before it can even start to get to a point of return to the beginning points of that colonization and the events that transpired from that. So yeah, it's an interesting time, you know. Another kind of date that I threw out to Tiarnie that I thought was interesting is, like, you know, I was doing some research on, you know, empires and such, and, you know, most empires throughout history only really peak for about 250 years. So a Pluto cycle is 247 years, right? So, you know, in terms of what is happening in America right now, it is going to have to be completely transformed, because history repeats itself. History doesn't lie. Astrology is cycles. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't rewrite our own history, and that's what we should be doing with these repeated cycles. But there is absolutely this energy in this decade in particular of, you know, a fall of a way of society in order to hopefully, right, we're all on the same team of wanting to restructure and build a better, more sustainable society, because fuck if we don't, is there even going to be a society? Is there going to be a world to sustain? I mean, we're on the cusp of breaking point in many, many facets of existence as human beings. And I think that it's really, the crunch is coming. It's already really here. I think it's easy to say, oh, you know, okay, we have time. There's not really time. Not to be the bearer of bad news, guys. I'm not trying to just be like a fucking neg, but, you know, like, people have to get this message. You have to really be, you know, active in a way of trying to bring change. And it's not about having to be a, you know, a social justice warrior, and that's not in everyone's capacity, but in your own life, you have to be for something. You have to stand for something and be of something in order to create these changes that we need, whilst also learning when to hand over the mic, because there's a lot of people talking about a lot of things that have no place in speaking of such things. And I think that we are really, again, in a decade where finally, you know, the voice of the voiceless are going to have a chance to, you know, hopefully, you know, start to bring in much needed change. But of course, this change comes with a shit ton of resistance. We can't forget Pluto in Aquarius is Pluto in a fixed sign, and it's the last fixed sign. You know, it's very easy to go, oh, you know, Pluto, it just brings deep and powerful transformation. Well, what, you know, modality or element is it moving through? Fixed air, I mean, talk about
fixed air doesn't change their minds.
They don't. They don't. And so we really are in this crux of this Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn and Aquarius, which is two Saturn-ruled archetypes, which really holds a lot of resistance, you know. And I think that we just need to be mindful of not giving up, because there is going to be potentially a lot of scenarios that could have a potential for change, very much may not immediately, and we cannot allow these steps backwards to distract us from still doing the work anyway, because this work has power and purpose, and it's not a time to be giving up. We have to have that tenacity that both of these, in my opinion, archetypes very much have, like Capricorn, Aquarius, like the ultimate space of tenacity, because they have the driving force of Saturn behind them. So yes, Pluto in Aquarius is Uranus ruled, but in traditional astrology, it's Saturn ruled. And as an Aquarius myself, like, you know, sometimes it's just, we see things the way that we see it, and good luck in us changing. And of course, in my own personal life, I try to be aware of that and more conscious of, like, well, you know, okay, get down from your God cloud, Katie, and where can you be a little bit more, you know, open to, you know, listening, right? Because I think that what happens is the Aquarius archetype is very good at saying what needs to be said or saying the right thing, but they're not always able to listen in response. And so I think that we all need to really become better listeners. And in a way, this sort of flows on to the relationship stuff that Tiarnie and I are going to talk about. I'm kind of trying to put a segue in there so I don't like ramble about Pluto for like an hour and a half, which I could very much do. But yeah, you know, we're really, you know, this runs so much deeper than what we initially think that it does. And I just really encourage you guys to just, you know, read up about history, like read about what was happening between like the 1770s and 80s, really until like the mid 19th century, you know, the 1850s, the 1860s and 70s. Globally, you know, and really look at the themes that are returning at this point, because even if other countries aren't maybe having their official Pluto return, half the world was colonized by countries who are, or were deeply influenced by countries who are. And so I think that really we're going to see a lot of shifts globally here. Of course, there's no other way about it, really. So anyway, that's my tangent. Thank you, Tiarnie.
That's all right. I just wanted to say in that too, that, you know, everyone was all like, oh, the Great Awakening. And, you know, it's like, oh, we've got time, or we're moving into the Aquarian age, which I think me and you have said a million times, that doesn't just happen in 3 seconds. It doesn't happen because 2 planets went into Aquarius, you know, like that's not the Aquarian age, my friends. But, you know, this, like the crumbling is now, like it is that, you know, that 500-year cycle of Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter and everything that happened in 2020, which we spoke about earlier too, was the Renaissance, was the end of the Dark Ages, was all of those things. Like when you do go back into history, we see what's going on. We're looking at Spanish flu, like the chart now and the Spanish flu chart, which lasted 2 years. This will, you know, same, like there were similar things, you know, Saturn and Uranus weren't square each other, but they were actually opposite each other. The nodes were in Gemini and Sagittarius. Like there is these similar things. You keep going back and you keep getting these signs, and it's all there. It is all there, written in black and white, and what we do with it now will be very revolutionary and very, you know, it's going to change everything. Like it really is. Like this is just, it's happening now. Like I've had people go, oh, so when is the crumbling? And I'm just like, so where have you been for 18 months? Like it is now. We are deep in it, and it's not over. Like, you know, when people go, oh, can you wake me up when it's finished? And I'm like, see you in like 2027 maybe, or because this isn't finished.
You know, because, you know,
it's not.
Pluto is in Aquarius until 2042, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a long transit, but those few years from 23 to 26,
exactly.
they're the ingress of some pretty huge things that we're seeing. We are seeing Pluto in Aquarius. We're seeing Saturn go through Pisces, the death, the end of the zodiac wheel. Yeah. Neptune and Saturn ingress into Aries days apart. Like, we haven't seen Neptune in Aries for 165 years. Saturn hasn't been there for 30. Like, we have very big things happening. And then when Uranus moves into Gemini, like, that was World War II. Like, like, there are things that aren't just stopping. Like, that, this is the thing. And it isn't about being negative. It's about being realistic and just taking a look around. And this is where astrology is such a superpower, in when you are aware of your own cycles. Even, like, yes, absolutely, like, be a history nerd and do it. And I love listening to it. And I do a little bit myself. But, I'm a North Node Leo, Pluto in the first house. I'm like, do you be sovereign? Look at your own cycles. Look at who you are. Stand on your own 2 feet. Be your own anchor. Like, some of my greatest calling here is for people to go within themselves, like, to actually, and that's where astrology and relationships come into it. Because for me, once you understand your chart, but not just your chart, you understand the language and you understand astrology and you understand cycles. And, we're going to dive into the Venus retrograde, which is an 18-month cycle. She only retrogrades every 18 months. She only retrogrades in certain signs. So this is what I was saying to my client today. I'm like, I'm always fascinated by someone who's got Venus in the sign that she retrogrades in, because they're going to have a very different relationship, perspective, karma, those sorts of things, than someone who's got Venus in other signs, because Venus only cycles these same 5 signs. So Gemini, Leo, Aries,
Scorpio, and
Capricorn. Yeah, that's right. And sometimes it can go Aquarius, Capricorn, but Capricorn, so it's really fascinating, like, do you have Venus in one of those 5 signs? Because your Venus is a retrograde. That you might not have Venus retrograde natally, but your Venus will retrograde. So that sign, I mean. So that's, we start to look at these gifts that we have in our chart and the gifts that the cosmos has given us. And then we start to understand what's going on. So we're not driven by fear. And that's why I will always speak truth or hear the truth from astrologers, because it's not about fear. There's, I always say there's nothing to fear and everything to watch. That's astrology. You watch it, you understand it, you become prepared and aware, and you can witness what's going on. But as soon as you dip into fear, because what we are going through is revolutionary. It is our own renaissance. We are coming out of what is a 250-year dark age cycle on some level, and the patriarchy's falling, everything's crumbling as we know it. The government are up in arms doing everything they can to hold on to fucking motherfucking control. And I'm not in a camp that it's either Saturn or Uranus, which I know a lot of astrologers are, and a lot of people are saying that you're either, you listen to the government or you go your own way and you fight them. I'm like, look, I love both. Why can't we have both? We can have boundaries, can't we?
Yeah, and the thing is that they're forming a square. So the thing is, like, it's not an opposition. It's not about, being too extreme in one opposition and trying to find the middle ground, right? It's like a square. Exactly. So it's like, no, like, it's the energy. It's sort of impossible to be here or there, because we're both so deeply. You can't really separate and say, oh, well, this is happening because of Saturn or this is happening because of Uranus. They are trying to do this, like, awkward blending and dancing. Like, that's how I see a square, right? Like, they're trying, like, they meet, they have an understanding because they have the shared modality, right? So they're both fixed right now. So Saturn and Uranus are like, well, they're agreeing on their disagreements, right? Because it's fixed, stubborn, I want it my way kind of energy. That's where the actual middle ground is. But it's not going to be either or, because they're so deeply in this squaring energy right now that there isn't really, and you can't really find that middle ground because there's no opposing midpoint. I mean, you could look at a midpoint between Aquarius and Taurus. That's going to be somewhere in Pisces and Aries. I'm not going to even try to calculate that in my head now, guys, but You would want to look at, say, the midpoint between 14 Aquarius and, say, 14 Taurus. That would be a pivotal degree. Maybe I'm just going to look that up later and put it in the comments or something, because I feel like that could be important for understanding a bit of an energy, a way forward, a way through. But really, it's a square for a reason. There's not supposed to be a way through other than the lived experience,
that's the lesson.
Exactly.
And that's the actual lesson. Like exactly. That's why where this great divide's happening. And I'm like, no, but the lesson is to actually find the center and take action, knowing that there is no such, Saturn has boundaries and structures, and Uranus doesn't want them, and that's cool. But the thing is that they both can work together. I say this so much to my clients and students and all the things. I'm just like, people think it's one or the other. Like if I'm responsible and I've got like structures and boundaries and it's fucking boring, but I just want to be free and a rebel. I'm like, you can have both. Actually, you can have both, because freedom to me is inside. It's here. It's here. Like no one could ever take that freedom away from me. And I wear a seatbelt in the car. That's a law. That's something that I would do. That's a rule. There's nothing wrong with rules that make sense. Some rules don't, and they're the ones that they're the ones that I often go, that doesn't make sense, not doing it. So the thing is that yes, and I get that, and that's going to be different for everyone. But the thing is that the square is creating this tension, this building tension, and it's accumulating to change. It's not just like, oh, you've got to be one or the other. It's like, where can we be both actually, and find this inner edge in our own lives, because collectively it's fucking tense out there. Like collectively it's huge. So that's where finding that inner peace and finding that inner freedom and working with both of these planets. And again, like I think in our last episode, we talked about how 21 years ago, Saturn and Uranus were square again in fixed signs, but in their opposite. So Uranus is in Taurus now, but Saturn was in Taurus then. So, and that's, segueing, but that's where the relationship stuff comes in, is because that's what I'm seeing is if you've been in a relationship for 20 to 23 years, old stuff is probably resurfacing and not even maybe conscious, but in a way that maybe there's a similar feeling, there's a similar topic, there's a similar theme, because those houses are still at play big time with the opposite planets. Yeah. So where there was structure and rigidity 21 years ago, now invokes freedom. Where does there need to be freedom? And for me, this is the evolution of relationships. This is the evolution and growth of the relationship for 20 plus years. Yes, if you're in a relationship for 1 year, 6 years, whatever, I'm not discounting that, because ultimately, since Libra season, we have been infused with a lot of relationship karma. Mercury retrograde Libra, Mars is in Libra, Mercury squaring Pluto. Now, moving into Scorpio season, that's relationship, it's union, it's two people coming together, it's shared resources. So again, there's that sort of that connection, that Scorpio has, it's the two people on some level, the consummation, we go from the 7th house of marriage, and then that sort of 8th house of sex and consummating sex are coming together, So it's relationships. And then we move into Venus in Capricorn, which is there for a long time and retrogrades there. So we're going to so relationships have been really under the pump, but our relationship with ourselves, to me, is the most important relationship. And it can be, we were talking about the Venus in Pisces exalted here to your left, darlings, and then to the right, the hedonist. But the Venus in, yes, this is the Venus in Pisces, which is exalted. And I'm a Venus in Taurus, which is at home. And we were talking about the differences, and Venus, I love Venus in Pisces because Neptune, the ocean, Venus come from, the foam, right? That's where she came from. She come from the ocean. So that's where she is really beautiful, and that's where she can dissolve all boundaries. And she's that unconditional love. It's glorious. Yeah. It's just when we, I could talk about relationships for a million years because it's one of my favorite things to talk about because my chart is so Venus heavy. Yeah. But I want to still stay on point so we're not here for another 3 hours. But yeah, I mean, really my main thing, and then I'm going to hand it over to Katie for her sort of, you know, like talk about this Venus. I think we'll definitely chat about this Venus retrograde because it's going to be really interesting to end the year and move into 2022. But yeah, I just wanted to remind people, I mean, I've been talking about it for a little while, but if with this Saturn-Uranus square being reignited, I mean, I'm seeing over the past 18 months, the amount of relationships, 20 plus years that have dissolved is been, I can't count. But at the moment, it's very interesting because old things are coming up to resurfacing. And this is where, to be honest, it feels like it's, you know, is there growth and evolution or is it time to move on? And it's going to be hard because people want to stay comfortable, right? Like they want to stay comfortable. But when you have the hard conversations, and I'm, you know, Joel literally said something ages ago, he's just like, wow, this sort of feels like when we first got together, which was 21 years ago. And I was like, and he didn't know. And I was like, babe, like it is. So there's these weird things. And this is where, do you have the courage to lean into that, to have difficult conversations with your partner? Because that's where marriages fall, because they don't have the courage. So everyone just keeps playing out and, you know, pretending and hoping. But these times that we're in, there's no rugs to push the problems under anymore. Everything's resurfacing for it to be healed and for it to evolve or for it to dissolve. And that's the thing. Do you want it to evolve or dissolve? And if you want it to evolve, you have to make the changes. You can't just keep putting your head under the sand. And that's what this personally has, that I've witnessed a lot. I've had people message me talking about their marriages of 30 years, all these sorts of things. Like that's what has been a strong theme in just, you know, random people messaging me, which I'm very grateful for, that they're sharing their stories with me. But I'm saying that the relationship thing of 20 plus, and especially obviously that 20 to 21 years when Uranus and Saturn was squaring, like it's really then, because you're going to see these very similar themes either being grounded or, you know, and reckoned. That's how I'm seeing it. Like Saturn is karma, Saturn is reckoning. It's like, are you learning your lessons?
Yeah. So I wrote down when you were talking because I love it. You said heal, evolve, dissolve. And I was like, I'm writing that down because I think I'm just going to call this video that, just for my own self. But
yes,
that's, you know, that's exactly it, you know. And like, for example, like, you know, I've been, you know, I'm 33, so, you know, 20 years ago I was 13. And so the relationships theme for me, just personally, and for those of you that are listening that are more, you know, my generation or younger, is like we were kids, right? So the application of like, you know, partnerships and sort of where Tiarnie spoke about where, you know, her and Joel have been together for 20 years. So they're seeing the repeated pattern within their partnership. But I've been reflecting on it a little bit, and it's really interesting because for me, that was the time where like, you know, between like 11 and 13 for me is when my parents were going through a terrible divorce and all of this kind of stuff. And a lot of what I'm going through now in my life personally, due to other transits that are happening that are being set off by this Saturn-Uranus square. It's hitting my sun, it's hitting my moon, it's hitting my Pluto all at once. It's bringing up a lot of stuff for me that was repressed at that time that I'm now, you know, what did we say? Healing, evolving, and dissolving for myself, because I'm like, I don't want to carry the wounds that I experienced as a 12-year-old child, suffering through my parents' divorce, into the relationship that I've been in now for about 18 months. And so this is where I really encourage those of you that even if you're listening to this and going, oh, well, I don't really know, you know, I was 10 or I was 12 or I was 15, you know, I think a lot more of like a family ancestral type connection will be at play here for you. And that can be said for everyone, right? Because even what maybe Tiarnie and Joel are going through is their own family ancestral stuff that was being brought into the relationship. But, you know, for those of you that are listening going, oh, well, you know, I'm not really in a 20-year relationship, I'm not really sure how this applies. Again, I can only share my own personal experience. It's going to be different for everybody, but I did notice how I could pick that correlation and how I can see how deeply like I'm being drawn into family like drama right now, and all of this stuff is being kicked off with this square, and how it is a repetition of what was happening at that point in time. That, you know, being 12, I didn't have the ability to have a say or to have control, or, you know, I was an only child, so a lot of very adult stuff was placed on my shoulders at a point in time that I should have just been a kid. And so with a lot of return of those cycles now as a 33-year-old woman, I'm able to make different choices for myself so that this pattern can be broken. And so this is where the, you know, the healing, evolving, dissolving comes in, where it's like, it's okay if there are parts of this cycle that are being, you know, dissolved. It's not a scary thing to let things go, you know, and being, you know, and I can't say, you know, I haven't been with my partner for 20 years. I can't imagine what it would be like to be with someone for that long and to have to face the reality of maybe, oh my God, you know, if that's, you know, a process of being let go. But, you know, and this is going to be personal for all of us. And please don't, like, I just want to sort of interject here, like, we're not trying to say to leave relationships either. I just, because, you know, sometimes I think sometimes people talk about, you know, these conscious relationships, and like a lot of the time they're just, you know, without actually sitting with individuals, they make sweeping statements about like, you know, leave your relationships and you'll blah, 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 blah. Like, I just want to be kind of clear, like, that's not really, like, at least where I know we're going with this. But for some of you, that could be absolutely the case, where others, you're actually really dissolving a lot of long-term stuff, like cycles beyond cycles that are like really long-term stuff.
Well, even for the people that aren't in relationships or that are younger, you know, I've just written here that where Uranus was 21 years ago, Saturn now is. So he is restructuring the, you know, the maybe rebel. Okay, so wherever you were rebelling, and you would have been rebelling because it was 21 years ago on some level, that house which Uranus was moving through, Saturn's now coming to clean up. So there's this element of now the foundation and the structure is changing. And then where Saturn was 21 years ago, Uranus is moving. So where there was maybe more rigidity or, you know, coldness or any of those Saturnian natures, Uranus is going, hey, like, and despite them both being in fixed signs, but, you know, which is, you know, a part of all of this whole thing because of the fixed fuckery that's going on. But Uranus is there to go, well, hey, like, let's break the shackles a little bit and find some freedom and revolution and liberation and awakening. And, you know, the revelations that Uranus will bring to that Saturn from 21 years ago will be quite like healing. Like, this is the thing, this is where the healing can happen. So yes, it doesn't matter if you're not in a relationship. The thing is that when you are in relationships for 20 plus years, these are the times where if you're not leaning in and having the courage, the honest conversations, that's where things start to get messy. Like, that's reality, you know, and that's what's going on a lot. Like, there's more of that going on than not. And that's what I have been definitely witnessing for 18 months. But this was the kicker for me when we went back on our last video and went, oh my God, 21 years ago, the same thing. And we just was like, it was wild, you know, it was so wild. And it opened up so much for me and all the healing that I've been doing because mine is, you know, with children and relationships. So it's been so incredibly liberating that I'm coming out of this fucking squeaky clean. Like, we're in it, but the healing that's happened for this and what I've needed to dissolve and the courage that I've had to have by having conversations that I could have very much not had because it's easier. It's very much easier in relationships or with children or whatever to not have the conversations. But that's, you know, the unveiling when people are like, oh, the veils are thin. I'm like, darling, there are no veils anymore. Oh, we're ascending. No, it's happening. It's here. Like, this is the whole thing though. Like, we're in this new reality. And you know, it's not this spiritual place that everyone thought it was. They're like, oh, the veils and, you know, we're ascending. It's like, oh, hello, look at the reality here. It's like a meteorite has just come and hit you in the face. Like, it's not euphoria, right? It's not euphoria. Enlightenment isn't this badge that you wear to go, oh, I've been through this and I sip my fucking cacao every fucking day and do yoga. It's like, that ain't enlightenment, darling. Being fucking burning and walking through the fire and facing these things that are happening now in this cycle, that is where you will find the gold, my friends. And, you know, you're talking to a very 8th house stellium, Pluto in the first, a shadow walker. You know, it's just the way I work. I'm not, you know, I'm not all about the fluffy bullshit as much as I am in light. You know, I'm in truth, and the truth is sometimes dark and it's hard and it's shadow, and they're the pieces that we want to lean into. And I think that this cycle, relationship wise, including Mars being in Libra, which is, you know, always interesting, and that Mercury retrograde in Libra has really brought up a lot of you know, a lot of interesting relationship conversation even, you know, like lots of relationship conversation. So to see this year out with this Venus Capricorn conjunct Pluto, mind you, retrograde, Katie, like let's riff on that before we wrap up, babe.
That's what I kind of wanted to touch on with this retrograde, is like it is stationing retrograde on Pluto. So Pluto is going to be direct. It will be, I think, at 25 degrees by, I think, what's the date? The 19th or 20th of December, depending on where you are in the world.
Yes, yeah, the 19th Venus, and 8, yes.
Yeah, and I think Venus will be at 26, but within a 1 degree orb of conjunction. And so when this happens, right, you know, the very kind of overall theme of, like, if you look into, like, you know, even the story of, like, you know, Ishtar or Persephone, these types of mythologies around Venusian sort of energies, is that it's all about, you know, she returns to the underworld, right? She's going through this journey for 6 weeks or 40 days. And it's interesting because that's present in any Venus retrograde, okay? Whatever the sign is, whatever's happening, that is always going to be the theme, is about going internally around Venusian type things, around relationships, around all this stuff, values. But when she's turning, when she's stationing retrograde on Pluto, Pluto carries the same mythology. And so it's intensified. And so for me, like, when I saw that, I just had flashbacks to the Venus retrograde in Scorpio that we all went through in 2018, November 2018. And that had the same double kind of theme because it was in Scorpio, which again has the similar mythology, right? So hopefully that's making sense, guys, in how I'm picking this up. And so even though it's in Capricorn and it's going to have more Capricorn type themes being, you know, delved into, happening on Pluto instantly, you know, it's a Plutonian Venusian return. You know, Venus Pluto is obsession, intensity, you know, and it's happening not very far away from where we've had a lot of really intense Capricorn, you know, activations and aspects in the last couple of years. So I think it's really going to be a space around, you know, moving through the shadow, moving through the underworld, moving through, you know, again, in your own Capricorn house. That's how you personalize this. But it's going to have a lot of, I don't know, I'm just picking up this real kind of 2018 link with this, just because of that Plutonian energy.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's deep. You know, it's deep, and we've had nothing but deep this year, you know.
So the depth isn't going anywhere. You know, if you thought you went deep, it's about to, you know, the year's about to, I mean, that's going to carry into next year, you know. It was interesting, actually. I was listening to, like, I love Jessica Lanyardou's podcast, and I was listening to it yesterday, and she talked about, she was actually talking about, like, a lot about the Saturn-Uranus square and all of this stuff. But, you know, she's like, don't really want to be the bearer of bad news, but, you know, really a lot of this sort of stuff is going to still kind of carry through for about another 12 months, you know, and there is a lot of things coming in next year that are, thank God, going to shift a lot of this dynamic, and it will bring in, you know, it's a lot of Jupiterian stuff next year and Neptunian stuff, which is in some ways nice to see, in other ways a bit tricky still. But, you know, we can't just sort of wrap up thinking that 2021, like, it's just a neat little package, because a lot of this stuff is still carrying on. And I think that it's interesting having a Venus retrograde on Pluto in the last, like, you know, 2 weeks of the year. Because that's going to carry through right up until, you know, I think, what's the date? February, like, when's Venus is going to be in Capricorn for a long, long time.
So Venus is in Capricorn the 5th of November to the 6th of March. And very interesting, as she ingresses into Aquarius, Venus and Mars are both at Capricorn 29 degrees, and they both ingress 7 minutes apart.
Oh, wow.
So very fascinating, because obviously Mars moving into Capricorn is great because that's where Mars is exalted. He loves to be in Capricorn. So this is going to be really interesting and really dynamic, getting the work did, getting some structure and some, like getting some movement. I think that I really love, we've got some good Mars energy coming up. Once Mars pisses off out of Libra, which has been like me being a fire breather because Mars has been all over my Pluto. My once in a 2-year become a fire breathing fucking witch, which has been amazing. But Mars is then going to move into his traditional home sign of Scorpio. Then he's going to move into Sag, which is just great. And then he moves into Capricorn, which is really good. Yeah. And then even into Aquarius. So we've actually got some really beautiful Martian energy, that masculine energy to really sort of ground us in and take some adventure. And like there's some juiciness around Mars, right? Yeah. But Venus, however, is the opposite. Venus is finishing up in Sag on the 5th of November. And then we are stuck with a Venus in Capricorn until the 6th of March. Then she's in Aquarius, which she's not really happy in either. And then finally in April, she'll move into Pisces, where she's exalted, and we all get to get lubed up and, get excited again. But, it's a very interesting dynamic to end the year and see the new year in with this very Plutonian relationship underworld energy, where we are going to have to rework what we've already been working on, even if we think we've been working on it, because I love the whole mythology, of course, with going into the underworld and Pluto, and that's where Hades was, like that's the whole story. That's what she did. So it's this, and like Katie said, go and read about it, go and understand about it. It's cool. I've got an asteroid class coming out with another girlfriend, actually, which we've dived into that because it's, asteroids are one of her favorite things. But even for me, like hearing the story, because she's a great storyteller, I was just like, I got to sit there and, I was Ceres and I was Persephone. The Ceres story is of her daughter Persephone being lost, and Ceres I have exactly conjunct my moon, and I've actually got Persephone in Scorpio in my first house conjunct my Lilith. So I have been both. There's this, Katie's laughing because she's like, yes, that's you. It's just, it's so ridiculous, right? Yeah. So we're getting this, you've got to have courage, I think that you've just got to have courage. Oh my God, did you see that flash of light?
What was that?
Oh, fuck.
Remember last time we were speaking about something really, just when it was private between us, remember, and your light started flickering and we were just like, holy shit.
Yes, it's just done it again. Yeah. So I think that, this is, I just keep saying deep. It's so generic, but
it's what it is. It's deep,
It is.
And another thing I just thought too, actually, is that, when the nodes shift into Taurus and Scorpio, it's happening with, Venus retrograde on Pluto, with the South node moving into Scorpio, which is Pluto ruled. Yep. So thankfully, Scorpio and Capricorn sextile. So that is going to be nice to see this early sextile between the nodes and Venus and Pluto. But it's still, it's going to be a lot of, this.
Pluto and the South node will the North node will trine. So there's actually something really delicious about this as well, moving into January when the nodes shift signs. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, I agree with having Mars join in Capricorn is going to be beneficial too, because remember, Mars hasn't moved through Capricorn for a couple of years without Saturn being there.
True.
So this is the first time Mars is moving back to this space without the impending Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto stuff that was happening, 2019, 2020 in Capricorn. So this is the first time Mars gets to move back through this space, in his exaltation without running into Saturn immediately, without bumping into Scorpio after a bit of a brawl with Saturn first. So this is going to be a new energy in that sense for Capricorn. Sorry guys, I'm fucking tired. For Mars, without this kind of heaviness on here of what was happening with Saturn and Pluto. I'm passing over to Tiarnie because I'm like blah 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 blah. It's
it's
my brain.
It is. I think that, make sure that you dig into your Capricorn house, check out where 26 degrees to 11 degrees is, and if you obviously have any other cardinal planets at 26 to 11 degrees, any planets in Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, or where am I? Libra. Did I say that? Yeah. So those four cardinal signs, because there's going to be, some interesting things going on there. Venus is going to be making some squares or oppositions whilst she is retrograde. So there's going to be, quite a lot of, going into the trenches and bringing stuff up. And because of all of this relationship stuff from pretty much Libra season, because of the planets and all the things, like this is really, this is really the evolution of, have you learned? Like, there seems to be like, okay, so this is the thing. Like, did you get it? Like, did you get it? And we're going to make you go down the hole, because ultimately, Venus is now in Capricorn and not really going to be really happy and exalted again until April. So we're getting this long drawn out Venusian energy around, again, reevaluating your values, your core worth, your sense of stability, what brings you happiness. And in Capricorn, that these are around you, maybe your ambitions and your foundations, and the stability that you have in a relationship. Like, let's be honest, how emotionally fucking stable are you in your relationship? How emotionally stable are you within your own self? So these are the things, as Venus moves backwards, hanging out with Pluto and being very touched by Pluto, she's asking more of us in this retrograde, just very similar to her in Scorpio. She's asking more of us. In Leo, it's going to be different. In Gemini, it's different. We get a different sense, but this time she's not doing it for fun. She really is going to move through, and then she's going to re-step all those steps back. And now I just want to mention, because this will be out, Katie will release this before the shadow starts, but the shadow of Venus retrograde is the 18th of November. So we've got a month where she's actually going over the degrees that she's going to backtrack on. And to me, this is where you be prepared. Just like a Mercury retrograde, as soon as you get to the degree where he's going to get back to, you wake up. You're like, they're going to give me the information. So whatever happens from you from the 18th of November to the 19th or 18th of December, depending on where you are, they're your clues. So when people go through all this stuff like, oh my God, I'm like, you had clues for 1 month, darling. Like the planets love you and they want to give you the clues, right? So if you wake up and pay attention, if you're having relationship stuff go on there or financial stuff, pay attention, because that might be the key. Don't go and buy the house when Venus is retrograde. Don't go and have, especially like things like cosmetic surgery. And if you meet someone new in Venus retrograde, it's not that it won't last, but there will be something that is revealed or could be hidden when Venus moves forward again. So it might not be all that it seems. You've got to look at the Venusian retrograde as like, just not yet, and those Venusian themes like relationships, money, cosmetic surgery, all those sorts of things, like they're not things that I would be doing in a Venus retrograde. And it's not out of fear, it's just out of being intelligent and going, no.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, something I kind of wanted to touch on because my brain and numbers and all that stuff. But so the Venus retrograde, if she's moving back to, did you say 11 degrees? She will then be making a square at some point with transit Chiron during that retrograde.
Yep, she will.
So, this is bringing up the healing, evolving, dissolving energy again, And so that will be a pinnacle point. And I wanted to bring Chiron up too, because everything that Tiarnie was speaking about this Libra season that we just had, that kind of was like one, kind of like my poor Libran friends, I feel like they didn't really get the Libra season they deserved, it's because, all of that stuff with the Mercury retrograde and everything that was kind of happening with that, the Mars new, conjunct the new moon and everything happening in those degrees of Libra was opposing Chiron. So this is, again, the repeated themes of like what was brought up in your relationships around, the last new moon that we had. We're about to have a Scorpio new moon next week at the time of recording this. So, about 3 weeks ago from today, A lot of what was stirred up with that, with Chiron in opposition, is then going to be meeting that sort of square point with the Venus retrograde. So, you know, your Aries, Libra, Capricorn houses are really going to be telling a story, you know, I would say, yeah, between November and April, I guess, really, bigger picture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you have natal Cancer placements too, of course, they get drawn in, but the main focus via transit would be looking at, yeah, you know, Aries, Libra, and Capricorn in your own charts to see where this overarching, you know, themes and activation and stimulation is coming in, and then bringing in the themes of those natal planets, you know. So, you know, for example, between Tiarnie and I, it's going to be touching completely different areas of our lives. And so this is where astrology is really cool, and where Tiarnie and I are like, come learn astrology, because we can show you how to personalize all of this. Like, yes, it's great reading all this stuff on Instagram and, you know, Venus retrograde and this and that and that. If you don't know what's being touched in your own chart or in the chart of your partner or your child, your parents, etc., it only means so much. And this is where a lot of the misinformation, I think, with astrology comes in, where it's very easy to go, oh, astrology is so general. Oh, everyone's, you know, okay, but like, what is it touching? Where is it bringing you deeper into communion with yourself? That is where really learning astrology can open so many pathways and doorways for you. And why I think it's always just such a brilliant tool alongside therapy and other types of healing. Or, you know, if you were a person, you know, it's a, you know, you can be a person of religion and faith if you wish, and still have a tool of astrology. You know, they can work simultaneously, because astrology isn't a belief system, it's a tool. And when you learn how to divine and read that language, it can open up so much for you in moving through patterns of healing and awakening and all those fancy keywords, you know. But yeah, come learn astrology with us. We teach astrology.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Because, you know, each of us in our own teaching styles, you know, we take you guys really deep into figuring this stuff out for yourself, and we love having these conversations for you guys. You know, when we find the time to sit together. You know, being on opposite sides of the world makes it a bit tricky sometimes, but we love to do this because, you know, it's so much more than a lot of the generic stuff out there that you are coming across. And there are brilliant astrologers that are sharing very important information between all of this noise, you know. You just need to know where to look, you know. And I have a free ebook it's full of my favorite astrologers and schools and YouTube channels and all the things that I use as a resource. You know, I give that to you guys as a resource yourself, you know, because maybe I'm not your teacher, and that's okay, but maybe there's someone that you connect to through me or your own path that is your teacher. You know, it's not like you have to come with us, although we would love to connect with you, of course. But, you know, there is a wealth of information out there, but a lot of the time the good stuff's a little bit hidden, you know. So it takes some, you know, use the Venus retrograde in a way to kind of dig in and dive in and see like who resonates with you. I always feel like a Venus retrograde is such a good time to actually like think about your life in all aspects and be like, who's actually where am I? Who's with me? Where am I going? Like, like there's a lot of reshuffling for a reason, whether it's what you want to learn, who you want to be partnered with, you know, what your work is. All of these things are stimulated by this energy. And so people get afraid with the Venus retrograde because they automatically think, oh my God, the end of my relationships. But it's an end of the way that you move within your relationships or interests, because Venus is your interests as well. You know, Venus is like, what do you love to do? What do you spend your time doing? You know, that is being up for evaluation now as well, in correlation with, of course, wherever Capricorn is for you. So there will be themes or blockages in the Capricorn house that maybe need to be brought to light, to be made aware of like what is actually impeding your growth, your evolution, your alignment with your values and what you actually desire in that house. That is the clue. And so like Tiarnie said, like I forget the date, but I think 18th of November to the 19th of December, a lot of things will be kind of coming up at that point that are going to give you clues up until April of like, you know, what the hell is going on. Because it's so easy in a retrograde to suddenly just kind of go, what the hell is going on? But there's always these clues. There's always information that has been gifted to you if you learn where to discern and read this.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you know, I think that the Pluto thing, it's a big deal, you know, with this retrograde. It's really, it's a lot.
Because just think, when Mars enters Capricorn, Venus and Mars are moving together, hitting Pluto.
Yeah.
Like, very, very interesting. I've got my 2022 kit, but I talked about how that's a really strong signature with Mars, you know, a malefic hitting Pluto, even though he's exalted. Venus is out of her retrograde at that point, you know, just about to ingress into Aquarius. Very, very interesting what will be catapulted or actioned after the retrograde, because as Venus is retrograding and then Mars moves into Capricorn, he's going to start actioning the work or actioning what you're learning or understanding. He will bring that sense of movement, that sense of warrior and courage to you, so that you don't have to be scared. You know, he will give you the strength, and then he will hit Pluto where Venus has just been. And, you know, that's going to be a very interesting time come that sort of early March. You know, they both ingress into Aquarius the 6th of March, 7 minutes apart. But let's just go back to maybe the 1st of March, you know, 5 days earlier. Like, that 1st to 6th is going to be interesting because they're going to be hanging around Pluto together. Very, very interesting. So you're going to get a lot of answers there, and a lot of shifts, and a lot of perspective, and a lot of, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting, that little bit of time, actually.
It's definitely a week to look for next year.
Yeah,
actually.
definitely.
Early March period. It's big. So I think not long before that is Jupiter into Pisces, if I'm not, or it's early, it's just in still like 1 or 2 degrees then, I think. I don't know, I'm not looking at a chart right now. I have no idea. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no, by March, he's like nearly halfway, because he's completely out of Pisces by May.
Oh, he is too, because he's flying through like, because he went to Aries in 2022, guys. My mistake, sorry. Gosh. No, there's something else I remember. I don't know. I remember just looking at a chart for the first week of March, and there was just something else. I don't know. Maybe it was something just more personal to me, maybe, and I'm getting confused. But there was something really big like that week. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just that what we're speaking of. Anyway,
maybe. But it's big. It's lots of stuff. There's lots, you know. I just hope that this is, you know, we've gone sort of in lots of different directions, especially at the beginning when you sort of talked about all that stuff. You know, it's really interesting and great information that I think is very valuable. But yeah, I really hope that this conversation has seeded some great things for all of our listeners out there. And it is always my absolute pleasure to come and talk with you.
Yeah, likewise, love. We always go wherever it needs to go, and, you know, both being teachers, you know, we want to kind of bring it to you guys in a way that now you can look at your own charts to discern and decipher this information, you know. So like the seeds that we're planting is just like, think about this kind of ongoing theme of, you know, Libra season into the early months of 2022. And then, you know, bigger picture, and especially if you were old enough to be in relationships, you know, intimate relationships 20 years ago, what is now being worked through, but from the opposing, you know, the reversal. Yeah. So, you know, the keys to look for really, I think, would be, you know, Capricorn, Libra, and Aries houses. That's going to be really stimulated as we shift into the new year. And
Cancer. I mean, all of that Capricorn stuff is like, I'm saying that too, because I've got a Cancer moon. So the thing is that all of this Capricorn stuff is opposing my Cancer moon. So if you are a late degree Cancer moon, we are going through a very, very big transit this year and next year if you are a late degree Cancer moon. So this retrograde still, you know, those cardinal signs are, you know, they're in it.
Absolutely. No, you're right. And then the other thing, like we said, is, you know, Aquarius, Taurus houses are moving through like a reversal of a 20-year cycle. So again, it's food for thought, right? You know, the chart. Think about your life in these time periods and think about what is returning, but, you know, to, you know, for a dissolution of the reversal 20 years ago. So yeah, Tiarnie, it's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure
Always,
having
darling.
chats with you. I'm sure we'll probably chat for a little bit after we stop the recording as well, like we did. But as always, guys, it's, you know, we love to have these chats with you. You know, please, you know, share in the comments, you know, if you're recognizing any patterns, you know, share them with us. Like we're happy to hear them, and you know, to see you guys putting these pieces together yourself. You know, that's what brings us joy as astrologers, is seeing you guys have those aha moments with these transits. So much love. You'll probably see us again maybe once more before the end of the year, or maybe coming into the new year. Sending you lots of love as you navigate and traverse this you know, this Venus retrograde, and we'll see you on the other side. Much love.
We will.
Take care.